Welcome to Sleep Smart. These paradoxes aren't just clever puzzles. They're gateways to everything strange and beautiful about being alive. So please, take a deep breath, close your eyes, and let's begin. 1. The Ship of Theseus. Imagine a ship, a grand wooden vessel crafted by skilled hands and pushed across the sea by strong winds and ancient maps. Its hull is built from oak, its sails from linen, and over time it becomes weathered. One storm chips away a plank, another rots the ropes, another tears a sail. Piece by piece, it is repaired. The crew replaces each broken part, not all at once, but over years, until eventually not a single original component remains. And yet, the ship sails on. It bears the same name, follows the same route, and is guided by the same crew. So here's the question: is it still the same ship? This is the Ship of Theseus paradox, a thought experiment dating back to ancient Greece. And it asks something deeper than whether wood can define identity. It asks what makes something, anything, the same thing over time. Is it its parts, its continuity, its purpose? Now consider this. What if someone collected all the original planks and rebuilt the ship from scratch, assembling it exactly as it once was? You'd then have two ships, one with the history, one with the original material. Which one is the true ship of Theseus? Or are they both, or neither? The paradox quickly moves beyond ships. It lands in the heart of human identity, because you, too, have been rebuilt over time. Nearly every cell in your body is replaced every 7 to 10 years. Your hair grows, your skin sheds, your thoughts evolve, your memories distort or fade. The you that went to primary school, the one who had a first kiss or felt heartbreak for the first time, isn't here, biologically speaking. And yet, you still say with confidence, "That was me." So what anchors your identity? Is it the body, the memories, the name, or something more abstract, like the continuity of your narrative? Maybe the you who lies in bed tonight is just a chapter in a longer book. Maybe you're not one fixed entity, but an ongoing process, a ship that never docks. Philosophers, psychologists, and even neuroscientists have tried to answer this. Some argue for psychological continuity, that identity is held in memory, belief, and consciousness. Others point to the self as a construct, a useful illusion, like a story we tell ourselves to keep the chaos in order. The Buddhist tradition goes further still, claiming there is no fixed self at all, that what we think of as me is merely a bundle of ever-changing sensations, thoughts, and perceptions. And so the paradox stretches into your own experience. Who are you when you forget who you were? Who are you when you act against your own values? When you grow? When you shrink? When you move to a new city? Or fall in love or grieve or change your mind? Are you the same or someone new? The Ship of Theseus doesn't offer a clear answer. That's what makes it so beautiful. It doesn't try to box you in. It opens the box completely. It allows you to rest in uncertainty, to be both yourself and a mystery. And as you lie in bed now, breathing in, breathing out, know this: whether you're the same person you were yesterday or not, you're still here, floating, becoming, sailing, always towards something unknown. 2. The Grandfather Paradox. Let's imagine, for a moment, that time travel isn't just science fiction, it's real. You've stepped into a machine, pulled a lever, and suddenly you're moving backward through the fabric of time. Days fall away, years disappear. You arrive decades before your own birth, and there he is, your grandfather. A young man, full of life, unaware of the pivotal role he'll play in your existence. Now here comes the paradox. You interfere. Maybe you prevent him from meeting your grandmother. Maybe something more drastic. Whatever you do, the result is the same. Your parents are never born, which means you're never born. And yet, here you are. You were the one who traveled back. You were the one who changed the past. But if your actions erased your own existence, then how could you have taken those actions at all? This is the grandfather paradox, and it twists the very idea of causality into a loop with no clear beginning or end. This paradox is one of the most famous in time travel theory, precisely because it's so intuitively unsettling. We're used to thinking of time as linear, first this, then that, cause and effect. But if time can loop back on itself, if the effect erases the cause, then logic unravels. Events begin to contradict one another. Time stops being a road and starts being a spiral. Some physicists and philosophers have tried to patch the paradox with clever theories. One popular idea is the multiverse, that changing the past creates a new timeline altogether. So in this version, you didn't prevent your birth in your own timeline, you simply created a second one where you never existed. That allows both versions to exist without contradiction. But the original paradox still lingers, haunting the edges of every time travel story. Because even if you make a new universe, what does that mean about the one you came from? Can two realities be equally real? Another proposal is the Novikov self-consistency principle, which argues that any action taken by a time traveler must be consistent with the past. In other words, you can't actually change anything. Whatever you do in the past was always going to happen that way, but that turns time into something inflexible, set in stone, a universe without freedom, without true choice. And here's where the paradox reaches out and touches your own life. Because even if you're not traveling through time, you are, right now, living in a web of causality. Every action you take affects something else. Every choice ripples outward. If you skipped breakfast this morning, if you said yes instead of no, if you missed a train or sent a text or held back tears, your story changed. Maybe only a little, but maybe a lot. The grandfather paradox reminds us how fragile the threads of life are, how interwoven, how a small shift might unravel something larger. And yet, we can't know which threads matter most. We live forward, but understand backward, only ever glimpsing what might have been. So as you lie in the dark, reflect on this strange truth. You are the result of a million coincidences, a billion causes and effects. Some you'll never understand. And if even one had gone differently, who knows? But here you are, existing, somehow, against the odds. And maybe, just maybe, that's its own kind of miracle. 3. The liar paradox. This sentence is false. 6 syllables, 4 words, and yet, an entire universe of contradiction. At first, it feels like a brain teaser, a party trick of logic, but the more you sit with it, the more you feel it digging into the very foundation of truth. Because if the sentence is true, then it's false. But if it's false, then it must be true. Around and around it goes, a perfect loop. A thought that folds back on itself so tightly that it can't escape. This is the liar paradox. It's ancient, mentioned by the Greek philosopher Epimenides, who claimed all Cretans are liars, despite being a Cretan himself. That version evolved over centuries, shaping everything from medieval debates to modern logic puzzles. And today, it still sits at the heart of philosophy, mathematics, and computer science. Why? Because it's not just a word trick. It exposes something vulnerable in the systems we use to define truth. The liar paradox reveals that even in the most precise languages, even in math or code. There are statements that cannot be neatly labeled. They resist classification. They exist in limbo. And from this limbo, a strange beauty emerges. Consider this. Most of what we believe to be true is built from language. It's how we communicate, how we think, how we remember. But if language can collapse like this, if it can create an unsolvable contradiction in just one sentence, then what else might it fail to express? The implications are massive. In the early 20th century, logician Kurt Gödel used a similar structure to create his incompleteness theorems. He proved that any logical system rich enough to describe basic arithmetic would contain true statements that couldn't be proven within the system. In essence, there would always be things that were true, but not knowably true. The liar paradox opened that door. It also challenges artificial intelligence. When programming machines to understand language, self-referential paradoxes like these break systems. They create loops that machines struggle to resolve. It's a reminder that even as we build smarter and smarter systems, we are still wrestling with fundamental uncertainties. But there's a more human angle to all this, because we don't just tell paradoxes, we live them. We contradict ourselves all the time. We say one thing and feel another. We believe something deeply one day and question it the next. Sometimes we even lie to ourselves, kindly, cruelly, unconsciously. And sometimes we say things like, "I always lie," or "I'm not good enough," or "I don't deserve happiness." These too can become liar paradoxes, false in form, but painful in effect. So the paradox becomes a mirror. It doesn't just reflect logic, it reflects how tangled our inner worlds can be. It also reminds us of the importance of silence, that maybe not all questions need answers, that some thoughts are meant to be held, not solved, that the comfort doesn't come from resolution, but from resting in the contradiction. As you lie here now, your body softening, your breath slowing, let the paradox swirl quietly. Let it do what it does best, not close a chapter, but open one. Let it stretch the edges of your logic and invite you into a space where words don't have to make perfect sense, to mean something true. This sentence is false. It doesn't want to be solved. It wants to be felt. It wants to sit beside you like a whisper in the dark, unanswerable, but real. And that's enough. 4. Zeno's arrow. Picture an arrow, slender, sharp, cutting through the air in perfect silence. It's been released from the bow and is flying toward its target. But let's freeze time for just a second. A snapshot. In that single instant, the arrow isn't moving. It's not covering any distance. It's just hanging there, caught in a still frame, occupying one exact location in space. Now freeze it again, a moment later. The same thing happens. It's frozen in another location, and again, and again. Zeno of Elea, a Greek philosopher from the 5th century BCE, used this thought experiment to challenge our basic understanding of motion. His question was simple. If at every individual moment an object is at rest, occupying just one position, then when, exactly, does it move? How can a series of motionless instants add up to movement? If time is made of indivisible slices, and motion isn't occurring in any of them, then how does motion exist at all? At first, it seems absurd. We know the arrow moves. We see it. We feel motion every day, when we run, when we throw a ball, when we watch cars pass. But Zeno's arrow paradox forces us to confront a deeper truth. That motion, when examined too closely, begins to dissolve. It's like trying to understand a painting by looking at a single brushstroke, or hearing a symphony by listening to one note. This paradox paved the way for questions about the nature of time and reality itself. Are we living through a smooth, continuous flow of time? Or are we actually experiencing a rapid sequence of static moments, strung together so quickly that they feel fluid, like frames in a film reel? And if it's the latter, what's filling the gap between the frames? In modern physics, we now talk about concepts like Planck time, the smallest measurable unit of time beyond which our understanding breaks down. Between those unimaginably tiny moments, what happens? Is reality blinking on and off faster than we can perceive? Or is the illusion of continuity simply a trick of consciousness? Even in mathematics, the paradox carries weight. The idea of breaking motion into infinitely small intervals plays a role in calculus, the very tool we use to understand change over time. Mathematicians eventually addressed Zeno's paradoxes through the development of limits and infinite series. They showed that the sum of an infinite number of smaller and smaller distances can, in fact, be finite. So, mathematically speaking, yes, motion is real. But the philosophical discomfort lingers. There's something deeply human in Zeno's arrow. Because aren't we all a little like that arrow, suspended in each moment, not fully aware of the motion we're making? Sometimes, in the chaos of life, it feels like we're stuck, like we haven't moved at all. But when we step back, when we look at where we were a year ago, 5 years ago, we see it. We've been flying the whole time. Growth, like motion, is often invisible while it's happening. You don't notice the shift in perspective, the softening of anger, the strengthening of resolve, until you pause and reflect. Zeno's paradox teaches us that the stillness we feel might be part of something greater, a motion we can't always perceive. As you lie here now, breathing slowly, imagine yourself as that arrow, not frozen, but quietly in motion, carried forward not by urgency, but by momentum. Not every moment has to feel significant. Not every instant needs to be dramatic. Even when you feel still, you are traveling, growing, unfolding. Zeno wanted to shake our certainty, to show us that even the most basic truths, like movement, can hide impossibilities when looked at too closely. But maybe that's not something to fear. Maybe it's a reminder that mystery is woven into the fabric of everything, that even motion, even time, even you, are more than what they seem. So close your eyes. Let the arrow fly, not with haste, not with force, but with grace. You're moving, even now, especially now. 5. The paradox of choice. Modern life is a buffet of possibilities, drenched in options, dressed in freedom, and sold to us as the ultimate form of empowerment. From the moment we wake up, we're bombarded with decisions. What to eat, what to wear, what message to respond to first, which app to scroll, which goals to pursue. We are, in theory, freer than any humans in history. But that freedom doesn't always feel like a gift. This is the paradox of choice, a modern dilemma introduced by psychologist Barry Schwartz. The idea is simple but unsettling. While choice is necessary for autonomy and well-being, too much choice can lead to anxiety, paralysis, and dissatisfaction. In other words, the more options we have, the less happy we become. At first glance, this seems wrong. After all, isn't choice a good thing? Isn't it better to have more paths than fewer? Shouldn't 20 kinds of shampoo mean we're more likely to find the perfect one? But this abundance comes with a price, because with more choices comes more pressure to choose correctly. The higher the stakes, the greater the fear of choosing wrong. Let's take a simple example, an ice cream shop. One store offers 3 flavors. You pick one, it's easy. The other store offers 50 flavors. Now, it becomes an ordeal. You taste a few, you linger, you pick one, but then the regret creeps in. Should you have tried the lavender caramel swirl? Was the mango chili better? Did you miss out? This phenomenon is called anticipated regret. It's the haunting feeling that the option you didn't pick may have been better. And it doesn't stop at dessert. In dating, shopping, job hunting, even choosing what to watch on Netflix, we're flooded with so many options that we begin to doubt not just our decisions, but ourselves. And here lies the deeper problem. Choice is no longer about selection. It becomes a performance. Every decision is a statement. If you buy this coat, it says something about your style. If you major in this field, it shapes your identity. If you move to this city, it says something about your dreams. And so the weight of each decision grows. It's not just what you're picking, it's what you're saying by picking it. Schwartz identifies two types of decision makers: maximizers and satisficers. Maximizers aim for the absolute best option. They research endlessly, compare obsessively, and rarely feel content. Satisficers, on the other hand, choose something that is good enough. They don't need perfect, they need peace. And research shows that satisficers are often more content and less stressed. But most of us are caught somewhere in between. We want to choose well. We want to be informed, mindful, intentional. But when faced with 100 possible shoes, 1,000 possible jobs, or 1,000,000 lifestyle paths, we freeze. Or worse, we pick something and then spend hours second-guessing it. This kind of decision fatigue drains us. We lose energy. We procrastinate. We avoid. And over time, we become less confident in our own ability to know what we want. Here's the strange twist. Choice overload doesn't just lead to regret. It can also make us more passive. Faced with too many options, we might choose nothing at all. We delay, we defer, we scroll endlessly, hoping the right choice will make itself obvious. But the right choice, more often than not, isn't out there waiting. It's the one we make meaningful. That's the quiet wisdom at the heart of the paradox of choice. That freedom doesn't come from having all the options. It comes from being okay with the one you picked. It comes from presence, not perfection. From commitment, not constant comparison. And so, tonight, as you lie here in stillness, ask yourself, what choices today brought you peace? What choices were made out of fear? Which ones mattered more than they should have? And which ones might matter less than you think? Let those questions float, not to be answered, but to be softened. You don't need to solve everything. You don't need to choose perfectly. You don't need to have it all. Right now, there's only one thing to choose, and that's rest. Not because it's the best use of time, not because it's the most optimized move, but because it's enough. Because you are enough. Close the menu, power down the tabs, let go of the comparisons. There is peace in this moment, and it's already yours. 6. The Barber Paradox. Imagine a tiny village, peaceful, self-contained, with just one barber. He's well-known, well-liked, and keeps things simple. He has one clear rule. He shaves everyone in the village who does not shave themselves. He never misses a face. If you don't shave yourself, the barber shaves you. If you do shave yourself, he leaves you alone. Sounds tidy, right? But here's the twist, the paradox. Who shaves the barber? Think about it. If he doesn't shave himself, then, according to the rule, he must shave himself. But if he does shave himself, then he can't, because he only shaves those who don't. The rule, so neat and clear at first, collapses when the barber becomes part of his own system. The logic short circuits. We've stepped into a paradox. This is the barber paradox, introduced by the philosopher and mathematician Bertrand Russell, and while it may seem like a quirky little riddle, it reveals something much deeper about logic, self-reference, and the limits of neatly organized systems. At its core, the paradox points to what happens when a system tries to include itself. It's related to what's known in logic as Russell's paradox, which showed that certain ways of organizing sets, especially self-referencing sets, led to contradictions. If you have a set of all sets that do not contain themselves, does that set contain itself? If it does, then it doesn't. If it doesn't, then it does. It's the same loop, the same puzzle. Now, why does this matter beyond barbers and theoretical sets? Because systems that include themselves are everywhere. In language, in thought, in artificial intelligence, even in the way we think about our own consciousness. What happens when a mind thinks about itself? When a rule tries to regulate itself? When we try to understand our own understanding? Think of ethics. If a person says, "I never take advice from people who give advice," what should they do next? If a government says, "We will regulate all unregulated bodies, including ourselves," what happens when they disagree with themselves? Self-reference introduces instability, and that instability is not always a flaw, it can be a feature. It can reveal boundaries. In computing, these loops are critical. Feedback systems, recursive algorithms, a program that evaluates itself. These loops power some of the most complex and powerful machines we've built, but they can also cause crashes when not handled with care. The Barber paradox isn't just a brain teaser, it's a blueprint for understanding where logic cracks under pressure. And then there's the emotional layer. Haven't we all been the barber at some point? Taking care of others while struggling to care for ourselves, setting rules for the world that don't quite apply to us. I help everyone, but don't know how to ask for help. I fix things for others, but don't know how to fix me. We often create versions of ourselves that operate smoothly, until we're asked to apply those same rules inward. Then the gears grind, then the loop begins. The paradox isn't just logical, it's human. As you lie in the quiet now, think about this. Are there places in your life where you've created rules that collapse when applied to yourself? Where you've said, "I don't deserve rest," or "I only help those who ask," only to find those standards crumble when you're the one in need? The Barber paradox reminds us that not everything can or should fit into a perfect rule. That sometimes it's okay for logic to fail, for contradictions to exist, for care to extend both ways. Tonight, let yourself off the hook. Let the loops unwind. You don't need to shave every face or hold every structure together. You don't need to fix every contradiction. Some things don't make sense and still matter. You're allowed to break your own rules sometimes. You're allowed to be the barber who doesn't shave. Just be. 7. The paradox of the stone. Can an all-powerful being create a stone so heavy that even they cannot lift it? It's a simple question, a curious one, but when you try to answer it, something breaks. If the being can't lift the stone, then they're not all-powerful because they've encountered a limit. But if they can't create it in the first place, because doing so would create something they couldn't control, then they're still not all-powerful. Either way, power has met its edge. And that's the paradox. This ancient dilemma is often used in theological debate. It challenges the very definition of omnipotence, unlimited, absolute power. If a being is truly all-powerful, can they defy logic itself? Can they break the rules of reality? Can they create a square circle? Can they make contradictions real? Some argue that omnipotence doesn't include the logically impossible, that asking for a rock so heavy it can't be lifted is like asking for a married bachelor. It's a contradiction, not a limitation. But others suggest that if we start drawing lines around what an all-powerful being can't do, then we've limited the concept itself. Where then is the boundary? And who gets to define it? The paradox of the stone touches something primal in us, the need to know if there's something or someone beyond limits. In religion, this question can shake faith or deepen it. For some, the paradox shows that divine power must exist beyond logic. For others, it shows that even divinity cannot escape reason's web. And then there are those who find peace in the mystery, that power need not be total to be meaningful, that greatness doesn't need to break logic to feel divine. But let's step away from theology for a moment. Because this paradox isn't just about gods or metaphysics, it's about boundaries. It's about how we define the edges of ability, ours, others, the universe's. It makes us ask, can power exist without self-contradiction? Can strength still be strength if it includes softness or surrender or not knowing? In everyday life, we grapple with this paradox without realizing it. We want to be strong, but also vulnerable. We want freedom, but also structure. We want to be limitless, but also grounded. And just like the stone, these desires collide. We try to be everything and hit the wall of being human. Think about leadership. We admire those who appear invincible, untouchable, endlessly capable. But what happens when that image cracks? When they can't carry the burden we placed on them? Are they weaker for it? Or just more real? Or consider parenting, friendship, love? We want to carry others' pain, but some stones aren't meant to be lifted. Some aren't ours to lift. And then there's the stone inside us, the thing we've built or buried or feared, a belief about who we are, a weight we've carried for years. Maybe it's guilt, maybe it's perfectionism, maybe it's the pressure to always be okay. We tell ourselves, I should be able to handle this. But what if the stone was never meant to move? This paradox gives us permission to let go of the myth of limitlessness, to realize that being powerful doesn't mean solving every problem or lifting every burden. It can mean knowing your limits. It can mean choosing your battles. It can mean resting. So tonight, if you're holding a stone, an invisible weight that feels like proof of your strength or worth, ask yourself, what if you don't need to lift it? What if the real power is knowing it's there and choosing stillness anyway? Let this be your answer to the paradox, not in logic, but in quiet, not in control, but in acceptance. The stone is heavy, the stone is impossible, and still, you are enough. You don't have to lift everything. 8. The paradox of the heap. Imagine you have a heap of sand, let's say 1,000 grains piled together. No doubt about it, it's a heap. Now you take one grain away, it's still a heap. You take another, still a heap. Keep going, one grain at a time. Eventually you're left with a single grain. Now ask yourself, at which exact point did it stop being a heap? This is the paradox of the heap, also known as the Sorites paradox, from the Greek word soros, meaning heap. It asks a simple question with no clear answer. When does a collection stop being what it is as we remove parts of it gradually? It challenges the way we use vague concepts and language, words like heap, bald, tall, or rich. We often talk in generalities. We say someone is tall. But how tall is tall? If you subtract a millimeter at a time, when does tall become average? Or consider wealth. A millionaire is rich, but if they lose $1 at a time, are they still rich at 999.9999s? How about $900,000, $100,000? When does rich fade away? This paradox is subtle but powerful. It exposes the fuzziness of the categories we rely on every day. It shows that many of our definitions, while useful, don't have hard boundaries. They blur at the edges. And yet, we treat them as solid. We build rules, laws, and expectations around them. But what happens when we can't pinpoint the moment things change? The Sorites paradox poses a challenge to logic itself. Classical logic insists that things must either be true or false, no in between. But this paradox introduces grey areas, fuzzy logic, in-between states. It says, maybe heap is not a binary concept. Maybe it's a spectrum. Maybe truth itself comes in degrees. Philosophers and logicians have wrestled with this for centuries. Some suggest using fuzzy logic, a system where truth values range from 0 to 1 instead of being strictly yes or no. In this system, a pile of 1,000 grains might be 1, a definite heap, while 500 grains might be 0.6, still kinda heapish, and 1 grain might be 0, definitely not a heap. Others argue that the problem lies in language, not reality, that words like heap are inherently vague, and the paradox simply highlights that vagueness. But then we must ask, if our language is vague, how do we ever understand each other? How do we make decisions based on blurry definitions? The paradox also extends into ethics and politics. When does poverty begin? At what point does an action become immoral? If you harm someone slightly once, and then again and again, at what point have you crossed a line? One act may not seem wrong, but 1,000 might. The Sorites paradox asks us to examine our assumptions about accumulation, change, and consequence. And then there's the personal side. You change every day. You're not the same person you were 5 years ago. But when did you change? Was there one day, one moment, when the old version of you stopped being you? Probably not. It happened slowly, grain by grain, a belief you dropped, a memory you gained, a scar, a choice, a tiny shift, and now, here you are. So many transformations in life are like that, gradual, quiet, invisible until they're complete. The habit you built, the love you lost, the confidence you grew into. It never felt like a leap, but more like erosion or growth or soft unfolding. Tonight, think about the heaps in your own life. What are you building, grain by grain? What are you losing without noticing? And can you let go of the need to know the exact moment it all changed? You don't have to name it. You don't have to define when a heap becomes a grain or when a chapter ends. You only need to honor the motion, the accumulation, the becoming, because you are always becoming, grain by grain. 9. The paradox of tolerance. Can a society that values tolerance tolerate the intolerant? It's a question that pierces through political theory, ethics, and even day-to-day conversation. It's known as the paradox of tolerance, introduced by philosopher Karl Popper in 1945. At its heart, it presents a dilemma. If a tolerant society extends tolerance to those who are openly intolerant, will that society eventually be destroyed by the very forces it tolerated? Imagine a society that welcomes all viewpoints. Everyone has the right to speak, organize, and express their beliefs, no matter how extreme. Then a group enters that society preaching hatred, exclusion, and domination. They demand their place in the public discourse. They use the freedom they're given to campaign against freedom itself. If we allow this, if we tolerate them in the name of fairness, aren't we allowing the roots of intolerance to grow unchecked? Popper warned that unlimited tolerance can lead to the disappearance of tolerance. He argued that we should not tolerate the intolerant, not because we want to silence people, but because we want to preserve the very conditions that make tolerance possible. In a paradoxical twist, protecting a tolerant society may require some level of intolerance toward those who would destroy it. This paradox challenges a core ideal of modern democracies: freedom of speech. If all voices deserve a platform, do we include the voices that want to dismantle that platform entirely? It's not an easy question, and it's not hypothetical. History has given us many warnings. Totalitarian regimes often rose to power by exploiting the freedoms of democratic societies, using those liberties to preach authoritarianism, and then dismantling democracy from within. The Nazis, for example, gained power in Germany through legal means before crushing opposition and destroying the system that allowed them to rise. And so, the paradox of tolerance is not about silencing unpopular opinions. It's about drawing a line when speech turns into threats, when belief becomes action, when ideology moves from critique to coercion. But drawing that line isn't easy. Who decides what counts as intolerant? Who enforces the boundary? These questions are uncomfortable. They force us to navigate the blurry space between protection and suppression, between open-mindedness and naivety, between defending freedom and defending ourselves. Some argue that the best way to counter hate is not through censorship, but through better ideas, stronger voices, and open debate. Let the truth defeat lies in the marketplace of ideas. But this only works when the playing field is fair, when reason can compete with rhetoric, and violence is not rewarded with power. In the digital age, this paradox becomes even more urgent. Algorithms amplify outrage. Platforms reward extremism. The most intolerant voices often gain the biggest audiences, not despite the openness of the internet, but because of it. And we're left wondering, is giving everyone a microphone the same as giving everyone power? On a personal level, the paradox plays out in conversations around the dinner table, in classrooms, and in friendships. Do you engage with someone whose views attack your identity? Do you tolerate someone who won't tolerate you? Can mutual respect exist when the respect is not mutual? It forces us to balance compassion with caution, to remain open without leaving the door unguarded. And it invites us to ask, what kind of world are we building with our tolerance? One that welcomes difference, or one that enables destruction? So tonight, reflect on your own boundaries. Where does your openness end? What values are you willing to defend? Not every disagreement is a threat, but not every ideology deserves a platform. Some stones, if left unturned, become the foundation for harm. The paradox of tolerance doesn't demand that we become rigid or harsh. It asks that we be wise, that we recognize when openness becomes vulnerability, that we protect what matters, not by shutting the world out, but by being willing to say, this far and no further. You can be kind and firm. You can be gentle and clear. You can believe in freedom and still know when to guard it. And maybe that's what true tolerance looks like. 10. The paradox of the unexpected hanging. A judge tells a condemned prisoner, "You will be hanged at noon on one weekday next week, but the execution will come as a surprise. You won't know the day of the hanging until the executioner arrives at your cell." The prisoner thinks it over. If I'm not hanged by Thursday night, he reasons, then it must be Friday. But if I know it's Friday, then it won't be a surprise, so it can't be Friday. He continues. If Friday is ruled out, then Thursday becomes the last possible day. But again, if I expect Thursday, it won't be a surprise either, so it can't be Thursday. He keeps going. Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday. One by one, he eliminates every possibility. Confident he won't be hanged at all, he relaxes. Then, on Wednesday at noon, the executioner shows up, and the prisoner is truly surprised. This is the paradox of the unexpected hanging. It's also known as the surprise execution paradox. And it plays a strange game with our logic, expectations, and definitions of surprise. On the surface, the prisoner's reasoning seems flawless. He uses logic to eliminate every day of the week. But somehow, he still ends up surprised. So where did the logic break? The core issue lies in the concept of surprise. The judge promised an unexpected event, but the prisoner's reasoning undermines his ability to experience surprise. By trying to anticipate surprise, he destroys it. The very act of analyzing the situation ensures that, no matter what, if the execution happens, it will catch him off guard. Because he's ruled it out entirely. It's a paradox rooted in self-reference, where a prediction contains conditions that change based on the prediction itself. Much like the liar paradox, this sentence is false. The surprise execution paradox turns inward. It folds over itself. It creates a loop where knowing changes the nature of what's known. This paradox has fascinated logicians and philosophers for decades. It raises questions about the nature of knowledge, expectation, and time. Can something be truly unpredictable if it's been promised? Can the logic we use to eliminate uncertainty actually create it? The paradox isn't limited to thought experiments. It has echoes in real life. Think of times when anticipating an outcome ruined the experience, or made it more jarring. A birthday party you guessed, but were still surprised by. A breakup you saw coming, but that still hurt. Or a test result you felt certain about, only to react with shock. Logic gives us armor, but emotion slips through the cracks. We live in a world full of predictions, weather forecasts, economic models, political polling. We try to map the future to eliminate surprise. But in doing so, we sometimes blind ourselves to what's still possible. Or we fall into the trap of overconfidence, believing that our reasoning is bulletproof. But life, like the executioner, doesn't always follow logic. It has its own rhythm, its own twists, and sometimes the most unexpected moments come precisely when we've convinced ourselves they can't. There's also a quiet, emotional truth buried in this paradox. Many of us try to avoid disappointment by predicting it away. If I expect the worst, I won't be hurt. But this too is a trap. We trade presence for preparation. We brace so hard for pain that joy passes us by. The surprise execution paradox reminds us that certainty is often an illusion, that thinking through every possible scenario won't always shield us, and that life's surprises, pleasant or painful, are part of what make us human. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, let your mind loosen its grip on prediction. Let go of needing to know what tomorrow brings. You don't need to reason your way through every emotion. You don't need to anticipate every twist. Some surprises aren't traps, they're gifts. Let life unfold. Let wonder return. Close your eyes and allow surprise to find you. 11. The paradox of the ravens. Imagine this. Someone tells you, all ravens are black. It seems like a straightforward scientific statement. You'd probably test it by examining ravens. Go out into the world, observe them, and see if they're all indeed black. But here's where it gets strange. According to the logic of confirmation, anything that supports the statement, all ravens are black, counts as evidence. That includes a green apple. Yes, a green apple, or a white shoe, or a blue pen. Anything that is not a raven and not black is technically evidence that supports the claim that all ravens are black. This is the heart of the raven paradox, also known as Hempel's paradox, named after the philosopher Carl Gustav Hempel. It hinges on a logical rule called the equivalence condition. If two statements are logically equivalent, then evidence that supports one must also support the other. All ravens are black is logically equivalent to all non-black things are non-ravens. So if you observe a green apple, which is not black and not a raven, you've just confirmed that all non-black things are non-ravens. Thus, you've provided support for the idea that all ravens are black. But that feels wrong, doesn't it? How can a green apple tell us anything about ravens? This is where intuition and formal logic part ways. Our gut tells us that only observing ravens can confirm something about ravens, but the rules of logic don't always follow our intuition. The paradox raises deep questions about the nature of evidence and confirmation. What does it truly mean to confirm a hypothesis? Does every supporting instance carry the same weight? Is seeing 1,000,000 black ravens the same as seeing one green apple? Clearly not, but logic doesn't seem to discriminate. This also highlights the problem of induction, one of the most famous issues in philosophy. Just because we've seen something happen many times doesn't guarantee it always will. We've seen 1,000 black ravens, but that doesn't mean the next one won't be white. Science works on patterns and probabilities, but it's never absolute. The raven paradox is a reminder of that fragility. It also plays with scale. If there are billions of non-black things in the universe, then there are far more potential confirming instances of the non-black, non-raven kind than of actual ravens. So while a green apple technically confirms the hypothesis, it does so in an extremely weak way. It's barely a whisper of evidence. Still, it's interesting to think that your breakfast could, in the most abstract sense, be part of a philosophical experiment. And here's where it becomes strangely beautiful. The paradox nudges us to reconsider what counts as meaningful. In a world filled with infinite data, which pieces do we elevate? Which ones do we trust? Which ones matter? In life, we often look for proof in the obvious places. We expect validation from those who resemble us. We search for meaning in familiar corners. But sometimes, the deepest confirmations come from the unexpected, from places we never thought to look. A kind word from a stranger, a peaceful moment alone, a green apple sitting quietly on your table, reminding you everything has a role to play. So tonight, as you rest, consider what ravens live in your beliefs. What assumptions do you hold about yourself, others, or the world? And what green apples have you dismissed because they didn't seem to fit? Perhaps even the smallest, most unrelated thing can whisper back, "You're on the right path." Let that idea settle. Let your thoughts loosen. Let your eyes close to the sound of paradoxes unfolding, reminding you that logic is vast, mystery is wide, and sometimes truth hides in the things we ignore. Sleep well, observer of ravens and apples. 12. The paradox of the lottery. Imagine holding a ticket to a national lottery. The jackpot is astronomical. Millions of tickets are sold. And you know, with a deep sense of certainty, that your chances of winning are microscopic, virtually zero. You look at your ticket and say, "This ticket will not win." And you're probably right. In fact, you could go through every single ticket, say the same thing, "This ticket will not win," and you'd be justified nearly every time. But then, one ticket does win. And suddenly, one of those justified beliefs was false. This is the lottery paradox. It exposes a deep tension between probability, belief, and logic. If you believe each individual ticket won't win, and you're nearly certain each time, can you still reasonably believe that one ticket will win overall? If so, then your beliefs are inconsistent. You believe a set of individual statements, each one likely to be true, and yet together they lead to a conclusion that must be false for at least one of them. We face this kind of reasoning more often than we realize. Think about medical testing. A doctor sees dozens of patients a day. Most will be fine. Statistically, it's safe to assume each one isn't gravely ill, but that assumption can't be applied to all of them. At least one might be seriously sick. The danger lies in treating high probability as certainty. Or consider investing. Most new businesses fail. You could say, this startup won't make it. It's a logical bet. But someone, somewhere, is launching the next Apple or Amazon. Saying none will succeed might feel right, but it's logically flawed. The paradox reminds us, just because something is highly unlikely doesn't mean it's impossible. And assuming every unlikely thing won't happen leads us into error. In philosophy and epistemology, this paradox challenges how we define rational belief. Can we hold a large number of reasonable beliefs, even if we know they can't all be true at once? If each belief is individually justified, but their collective implication is false, what does that say about the nature of knowledge itself? Some try to solve this by limiting the number of probabilistic beliefs we hold at once. Others argue we should only believe something when the probability crosses a higher threshold. But none of these solutions are clean. They ask us to rewrite how belief works, to treat belief not as binary, true or false, but as a spectrum, a scale of confidence. The paradox also touches something emotional. We often dismiss hope because it feels unrealistic. We tell ourselves, it won't happen to me, because statistically it probably won't. But the lottery paradox whispers back, yes, but someone always wins. That doesn't mean you will, it means someone will, and you might not know it until the moment it happens. There's beauty in that uncertainty, in holding space for the improbable, in daring to hope not in spite of the odds, but alongside them. Not with reckless belief, but with quiet openness. And on the flip side, the paradox teaches humility. Just because something is likely doesn't mean it's guaranteed. Just because every sign says no doesn't mean yes is impossible. It reminds us not to overcommit to predictions, not to lean too hard on what's probable when the possible still lingers in the wings. So tonight, as you breathe into stillness, think of all the tickets in your life, all the moments you've written off, all the chances you never took because you thought you knew the outcome. Maybe you were right, but maybe, just maybe, one of those forgotten tickets is holding a future you didn't expect. Let this paradox be a soft invitation to hope, to hold room for the unlikely, to believe in possibility without demanding certainty, because someone always wins, and once in a while, it's you. 13. The paradox of the tortoise and Achilles. Let's return to ancient Greece, where the philosopher Zeno gave us a puzzle that still bends minds today. It's called the paradox of the tortoise and Achilles. In it, the mighty warrior Achilles challenges a slow-moving tortoise to a foot race. To be fair, he gives the tortoise a small head start. The race begins. Achilles sprints forward. He reaches the spot where the tortoise started, but by then, the tortoise has moved a little farther ahead. Achilles then runs to that new spot, but the tortoise has again moved slightly forward. This continues, endlessly. No matter how fast Achilles runs, the tortoise will always be just a little ahead. Step by step, interval by interval, Achilles never quite catches up. But wait, this seems ridiculous. In reality, Achilles would overtake the tortoise easily. So why does the logic feel so airtight? Why does the paradox work? Zeno's puzzle reveals something fascinating about motion, infinity, and the way we divide space and time. The paradox is based on the idea that before Achilles can reach the tortoise, he must first reach halfway, and before he can reach that, he must go halfway to halfway, and so on. The journey splits into infinite steps. And if you have to complete an infinite number of tasks, how can you ever finish? This leads us to a confrontation with infinity. How can something finite, like the race between two runners, contain an infinite number of steps? And how can those steps take place in finite time? Mathematicians eventually solved the paradox using the concept of convergent series. Even though there are infinitely many intervals, the total time to complete them adds up to a finite amount. In modern terms, Achilles catches up because the infinite series of distances gets smaller and smaller, and their sum converges. But Zeno's paradox wasn't about mathematics alone. It was about how we perceive movement, time, and space. And that's where its beauty lies. It shows how our minds struggle to grasp the infinite, how we divide moments into smaller and smaller pieces until the pieces seem impossible to cross. It reminds us that logic, taken to its extremes, can lead to conclusions that feel more like poetry than physics. Think about your own life. How often do you feel like Achilles, racing towards something yet always just behind it? A dream, a version of yourself, a feeling of peace. You get closer, and it moves. You try again, and it slips further ahead. No matter how fast or how hard you try, the goal always seems just out of reach. But maybe, like Zeno's paradox, that's only how it seems. Maybe the journey is made up of smaller steps than we realize. And maybe those steps, taken one by one, add up to something real, something attainable. The paradox also reminds us that progress doesn't have to feel dramatic. You may not leap forward, but you're moving. Even the tiniest steps are steps. Even when the goal feels distant, you're closing the gap. And what of the tortoise, the quiet, steady one, the one we overlook? Zeno's paradox also honors the slow and the patient. The truth that sometimes what seems slow is still making its way forward. That persistence, not speed, defines the race. So tonight, as you drift into rest, picture Achilles chasing the tortoise. Not with frustration, but with wonder. Let yourself marvel at the beauty of motion, the strangeness of time, and the softness of each step. You're not stuck. You're in motion. You're chasing something, and you're getting closer. Infinity doesn't block you. It guides you. And even the impossible, sometimes, just takes time. 14. The paradox of the twins. Now we turn our gaze to the stars, to a paradox that blends time, physics, and our place in the universe. It's called the twin paradox, and while it may sound like science fiction, it's rooted in one of the most well-tested theories in modern science, Einstein's theory of relativity. Imagine this: identical twins. One stays on Earth, the other boards a spaceship and travels at near light speed for a few years, then returns. When the traveling twin steps off the ship, something astonishing happens. She's younger than her sibling, not just in spirit or appearance, but literally. Less time has passed for her. This is the twin paradox. At first, it seems impossible. How can time pass differently for two people who were born at the same moment? How can one twin age more slowly just by moving fast? Yet this is what Einstein's theory predicts, and what experiments have confirmed. The paradox arises from time dilation, a key part of special relativity. According to this theory, time doesn't flow at the same rate for everyone. The faster you move through space, the slower you move through time, at least from the perspective of someone who's not moving with you. It's not just a trick of perception. It's a real, measurable effect. Atomic clocks flown on airplanes have ticked more slowly than identical ones left on Earth. GPS satellites have to account for it every day. But where the paradox gets interesting is in its symmetry. If motion is relative, then from the traveler's point of view, it's the Earth that's moving. Shouldn't she see her twin aging more slowly too? How can each twin see the other as aging less, and yet only one ends up younger? The key is acceleration. The traveling twin turns around during her journey. She decelerates, reverses course, then accelerates back toward Earth. That moment of turning breaks the symmetry. She's no longer in a uniform frame of motion. This shift causes her to experience less time overall. It's not just speed, it's the change in speed that matters. And that's what makes the paradox a window into deeper truths. This paradox isn't just a curiosity. It's a reminder that time is not absolute. That what we think of as a steady river is more like a fabric, warped and stretched by motion, gravity and perspective. We are all travelers in time, but we don't all move through it in the same way. And that idea is strangely comforting. We often compare ourselves to others. We wonder why someone else seems ahead, why their life moved faster, why their milestones came sooner. But the twin paradox whispers, maybe your clock is just ticking differently. Maybe your path, though slower, is still profound, still valid, still real. The paradox also humbles us. It reminds us that our experience of time, so central to who we are, isn't fixed. It bends, it dances, and it teaches us that reality is stranger, softer, and more mysterious than we were taught. So tonight, picture those twins. One grounded on Earth, one sailing through the stars, both connected by something deeper than time. As you fall asleep, feel the ticking of your own clock, not as a countdown, but as a rhythm uniquely yours. You are not late. You are not behind. You are moving through time in your own way. And that is enough. 15. The paradox of identity over time. Who are you really? Not just your name, your face, or your memories, but you. Are you the same person you were 10 years ago, 5 years ago, yesterday? If not, what changed? And if so, what stayed the same? This is the paradox of identity over time. It asks a profound and unsettling question. How can something change, physically, mentally, emotionally, and still be considered the same thing? And at what point does it become something else entirely? Philosophers often use a famous thought experiment to illustrate this. The ship of Theseus. Imagine a wooden ship, proudly displayed in a museum. Over time, the planks rot and they are replaced one by one, until eventually every single piece of wood has been swapped out. Now ask yourself, is it still the same ship? If it's not, at what point did it stop being the original? After the first plank, the last? Or was it always the same ship, even though none of the original material remains? The ship of Theseus becomes even more complicated when you imagine rebuilding the ship with the original planks in a different location. Now there are two ships claiming to be the original. Which one, if either, truly holds the identity? This paradox is not just about ships, it's about us, because we too are constantly changing. Your body replaces cells regularly, your thoughts shift, your experiences reshape your mind. The person you are today is, materially and emotionally, different from the person you were in the past. And yet, we speak of ourselves as singular, continuous beings. So who are you? Are you the collection of your memories, your personality, your DNA? And if all of these change, what remains? This paradox touches every part of human experience. Relationships evolve. People drift apart, not because of a single event, but because time quietly transforms them. You've changed, someone might say, and they're right. But haven't we all? The paradox of identity. Over time isn't just philosophical, it's deeply emotional. It explains why nostalgia feels like longing for someone who no longer exists, why regret stings, because the you who made that choice is different from the you who remembers it. And yet, we hold ourselves accountable. We carry our past as if it still belongs to us. Does it? Even the idea of personal growth contains this paradox. We celebrate becoming better versions of ourselves, but to become something new, we must, in part, let go of who we were. So does growth mean shedding identity, or discovering it? Modern psychology and neuroscience explore similar questions. The brain is plastic. It changes with time and environment. Memory is reconstructive. It's not a perfect recording, but a reimagining. Our sense of self is built from stories we tell ourselves. But if those stories shift, does the character change too? Some suggest that identity isn't a fixed essence, but a process, something fluid, evolving, and emergent. That we are not things, but transitions. Not nouns, but verbs. Not who we were, but who we are becoming. And perhaps that's the most peaceful way to think about it. Not as a loss of self, but a continual becoming. You are a ship sailing through time, weathering storms, gathering stories, replacing planks. And even as your form changes, your journey, the arc of your becoming, holds your truest self. So tonight, as your thoughts begin to drift, ask yourself gently, who was I today? And who might I become tomorrow? Not with fear, but with wonder. Not with judgment, but with grace. You are not who you were, and that's okay. You are still you. And tomorrow, you'll still be you, just with new sails. Let that comfort you as you close your eyes. Let the paradox wrap around you like a soft tide, changing, becoming, always you. 16. The paradox of omnipotence. Can an all-powerful being create a rock so heavy that it cannot lift it? If yes, then the being cannot lift the rock and is therefore not all-powerful. If no, then the being cannot create the rock and is again not all-powerful. Either way, the concept of absolute omnipotence seems to collapse under its own weight. This is the paradox of omnipotence, a question that has challenged theologians, philosophers, and thinkers for centuries. It strikes at the heart of divine power, asking whether the very idea of unlimited strength is even logically coherent. At first glance, it seems like a clever word trick, a brain teaser designed to stump. But look closer, and you'll see a deeper inquiry into the limits of language, logic, and our understanding of power itself. Can power include the power to defeat itself? Can a perfect being perform a task that contradicts its own perfection? This paradox forces us to rethink how we define omnipotence. Is it the ability to do anything, even the logically impossible? Or is omnipotence limited to what is logically consistent? Can a square be a circle? Can 1 + 1 = 3? If not, then is a being limited simply because it cannot perform nonsense? Many philosophers argue that omnipotence should not include contradictions, that doing the logically impossible, like creating a rock that can't be lifted by the lifter, is not a true task at all. It's just a misuse of language, like asking if a being can draw a 4-sided triangle. The failure isn't in the being, it's in the question itself. But others argue that this redefinition weakens the concept, that true omnipotence should transcend logic, just as infinity transcends counting. If we limit a God's power to logic, are we placing logic above divinity? The paradox also invites personal reflection. We all encounter moments where we try to be everything: strong, kind, wise, unshakable. But sometimes, the very act of trying to be limitless becomes the source of our limitation. We carry emotional weights we can't lift. We set expectations so high they become prisons. The rock becomes our own. And yet, perhaps the paradox doesn't seek resolution, but understanding. Maybe true power lies not in endless ability, but in knowing what not to hold.
maybe an omnipotent being wouldn't need to lift every rock, because it would understand when to let go.
So tonight, as your body sinks into stillness, let go of the need to do everything. You don't have to be infinite. You don't have to carry every burden. You don't have to answer every question. Rest in the mystery. Float in the paradox. Let the questions remain open, soft, shimmering in the space between thought and sleep. You are not weak for resting. You are not limited for being human. Even the infinite sometimes pauses.